Chapter 4. Lincoln woke to Flacco scratching the front door. His mother was in the bathroom using the hairdryer. "Mom," Lincoln hollered sleepily. "Flacco wants in." Flacco scratched and whined as the hairdryer wailed. Lincoln thought he heard eggs clanking in a pot of boiling water. He lay in bed, eyes closed. It was Friday. There would be no basketball practice today. He wiggled his toe. Still hurt. His wrist was tender, and his shoulder pained him. He yawned and rolled onto his side. As he lay in bed, he thought of the gym at his old school. 3 banners from the championship years, 1967, 1970, and 1977, hung near the rafters, faded and dusty with neglect. Those years were before his time, before anyone's time. It seemed so long ago. He thought about Monica. Was she getting up from bed? Was she combing her hair in front of the bathroom mirror? Was she at the breakfast table, dabbing a piece of tortilla into yellow egg yolks? He wondered if she spoke in Spanish or English to her parents. Lately, he and his mother had started using English, even at home. Lincoln's Spanish was getting worse and worse. When he heard his mother call, he rolled onto his stomach and pushed himself up quickly, letting his blanket slip onto the floor. He shivered and said, "Ay, hace mucho frío," and pulled on a sweater backwards over his pajama top. He felt the label tickle his chin, but he didn't bother to fix it. He shuffled to the kitchen where his mom, pink from showering, was putting bread into the toaster. He was right. Soft boiled eggs and toast with a smear of jam. "I'm going to let Flacco in," he said as he passed her and went into the living room. Flacco's nose was pressed to the window, and when he saw Lincoln, he barked loudly. "Ya, perrito," Lincoln called, hurrying over to the cold floor. Flacco nudged his body through the door and, without even glancing up at Lincoln, hobbled to his bowl. At the breakfast table, his mother said that Roy, her boyfriend, would be coming over that night. The 3 of them might go out for dinner. "Do I have to?" Lincoln asked. He didn't like Roy, who was shorter than his mother. He drove a baby blue BMW, a girl's color, Lincoln thought, and was like Mr. Schulman, pudgy and pale. Lincoln figured he couldn't run around the block without stopping to pinch the pain in his side. Some man. "It'd be nice," his mother said. "He likes you." Lincoln chewed his toast but didn't say anything. For a second he thought of his father, but when he couldn't picture what he looked like, he thought of the creaking rafters of his old gym. Those 3 banners, limp and faded and nearly forgotten. Without thinking, Lincoln asked, "What's Dad doing? We never hear from him." His mother chewed slowly, and after clearing her throat, said, "He's still in Los Angeles. He's still a parole board officer." "What's that?" "You know, he works for the police department. He checks up on criminals when they get out of prison. It's a hard job." "Do I look like him?" His mother smiled and touched his hair. "You're just like him. Strong." Lincoln didn't want to think about his father, and he didn't want to think about Roy. He cracked open his geography book, and once again it fell open to the page of the camel driver with the broken teeth and lined face. It was a hard life for him, too, and for everybody who worked under the sun. "I have to hurry," Lincoln said, taking his plate to the sink. "Then you'll come with us?" she asked. "We might have late practice," he lied. There never was practice on Friday. Coach's shooters belonged to a bowling league, and Friday was their night to play. He could feel his mother staring at him as he walked into his bedroom. He dressed quickly, combed his hair, and brushed his teeth, and was out the door before his mother could kiss him. He barely heard her say, "Have fun at school." Lincoln caught up with James, and since they were early, they stopped at 7-Eleven for an apple pie, which they tore in half and wolfed down. They licked their fingers, and James said, "Man, that was good." They walked in silence. Then Lincoln asked, "What does your dad do?" "He's a surveyor." "A surveyor?" Lincoln asked, surprised. He had expected to hear a doctor or a lawyer. Everyone in Sycamore seemed to have a fancy job. "Yeah, that's his racket. He's one of those guys you see standing in an orange vest by the freeway." James picked up a rock and hurled it at a sparrow on the telephone wire. "Mom's the one who makes the big bucks. She has an important store in Burlingame. Some of the stuff is from Mexico." Lincoln kicked a pile of leaves and tried to remember if he had seen her store. His Uncle Raymond lived in Burlingame, and Lincoln had spent a week there after his father and mother had gotten a divorce. They got to school a few minutes before the tardy bell rang. Mr. Kimball, his hair messy from a wind that was howling and dark storm clouds, was waiting with his tardy slips. "Not today, Mr. Kimball," James mouthed off. "But I'll get you," Mr. Kimball answered back. He chuckled under his breath. Okay. Lincoln and James smiled as they hurried past him the first period. Lincoln couldn't concentrate on algebra. Basketball was on his mind. He closed his eyes and faces flashed before him. His ex-girlfriend, Vicky, Monica Torres, Roy in his baby blue BMW, his mother, Coach Yasudis yelling on the sidelines. An image of Vicky, snapping a mouthful of juicy fruit gum, asked with a sneer, "What side you on?" "Mendoza, answer this problem," Mr. Green called out, and Vicky's image burst like a soap bubble. He was pointing to a problem on the board. Lincoln looked up, startled. Well, let me see, it's whatever you say." A few students turned to look at him. Durkins, a forward on the second string team, grinned at him. He wouldn't have known the answer either. Mr. Green wet his lips and behind the glint of thick glasses stared at him, hard. Lincoln, feeling like an idiot, looked down at his hands folded on his desk, which was scarred with the initials C.O. Lincoln traced his fingers over the letters, sorry that he couldn't answer Mr. Green. Excuse me. Rain was coming down hard by the time the bell rang and algebra class let out. Lincoln shouldered his backpack. As he passed the teacher, he muttered, "I'm sorry." Mr. Green shuffled a batch of paper, said, "Your grades are slipping. What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Are you sure?" "I'll try harder," Lincoln said and turned away. Then he turned back to say, "This school's different," and left without explaining what he meant. In spite of his hurt toe, he ran to his history class, where he learned that chickens came to Egypt from India. Man, that was a long walk, Lincoln thought. He smiled as he pictured hordes of white-throated chickens clucking over sand dunes and taking boats up the Nile to Alexandria. Were they chickens like today's chickens? Andy, the A+ in everything but PE student, asked. His pen was poised and ready for Mrs. Wade, the teacher, to answer. "No one knows," she replied. That's a good answer, Lincoln thought. It seems like we can't remember last week. How are we going to remember way back then? By lunch period, the rain had stopped and a slice of blue showed above the school. Lincoln ate his lunch standing under a tree. He bit 3 times into a bruised apple and pitched it into the trash can. 2 points, he thought. Then went looking for Monica Torres. He wanted to see her. He talked to her. His heart thumped like a basketball bouncing down the stairs. What am I going to say to her? He muttered to himself. He looked in the cafeteria, but she wasn't there amid the din of forks dropping and students laughing and yelling. He walked between the lockers. He went into the gym where the 3 girls were huddled together, talking, but she wasn't there. Finally, he found her in the library, writing in what he figured was her journal for English. He walked up to her and said, "Hi." "Oh, hello, Lincoln," she replied. "Where's James?" "I don't know," he answered, pulling out a chair and sitting down. The librarian looked his way, and he gave her a nod. "Eating lunch, I guess." He peeked at her journal and asked, "What you writing?" She closed the journal and, after a moment of silence, said, "Oh, just about last night." "What happened last night?" She turned over an eraser between her fingers and said that she had had an argument with her father. "I told my dad that I wanted to quit Aikido, but he got mad and said I was spoiled. He said that when he was a kid, he worked in the fields." She stopped suddenly. I know the rap. My mom did her share of field work in the valley." He took the eraser away from her and squeezed it until his knuckles turned bone white. "Yeah, every Christmas we go down to Fresno. That's where Mi Familia is. They talk about cardboard in their shoes, blisters, lawn mowing jobs. It's boring." "My dad's from Salinas. He used to cut broccoli and artichokes. I don't like broccoli. You?" "It's all right. Brussels sprouts are my problem." "Brussels sprouts," Monica mused. "That's another one I can't stand." Lincoln looked up at the clock on the wall. It was 5 minutes to 1. "I had better make my move," he thought to himself. His heart did it again. "Monica, I was wondering," Lincoln began, biting his lips. "I was thinking maybe we can, I don't know, maybe shoot some hoop Saturday?" "Saturday?" "I can't," she answered, smiling and stuffing her binder into her backpack. "I'm going somewhere." The basketball in his heart went flat. Then she added, "How about Sunday? Late afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock?" The basketball filled with air and went bumping down the stairs, out of control. "Yeah!" he cried. "Sounds fine. Where?" The librarian looked at him and pursed her lips. Monica, slinging her backpack onto her shoulder, said, "Cornell Elementary. That's where I slam and dunk." Slam and dunk. I like that. Lincoln couldn't believe his good fortune. She talks like a guy, but she's so cute, he thought. Lincoln walked to class in a daze. After school, he hurried home, nearly running in spite of his hurt toe and the weight of weekend homework on his shoulders. Not to mention worry about Roy.